The attorney said my son-in-law would be out on bail by Thursday. That was the sentence that kept running through my head while I stood at my kitchen window, watching the rain come down over the back field. 43 acres. My father's land. His father's before that, and 2 weeks ago I'd come within one signature of losing all of it. I didn't lose it, though. That's what matters. I'm getting ahead of myself. My youngest daughter called me on a Wednesday night. I remember because I'd just come in from checking on the fence line along the south pasture, a section of cedar post that needed replacing before winter. I was 64 years old, and I still walked that fence myself. My son-in-law thought that was embarrassing. He'd made a comment about it once at dinner, something about how a man in my position shouldn't be out doing hired help's work. I'd smiled and passed him the cornbread. I'd already decided by then that I didn't like him much. My youngest, she'd become a family law attorney down in Nashville, called me at 9:15 on a Wednesday. Not unusual for her to call late. She kept long hours. But she didn't say hello the way she normally did. She said, "Dad, don't talk, just listen. I need you to pull out every piece of paper you've signed in the last 6 months and put it somewhere safe. Tonight. Do you hear me?" I said, "Sweetheart, what in the world?" "Dad, tonight, lock them in your truck if you have to, and don't say anything to Lou or Sherry about this call." Lou is my older son. Sherry is his wife. They moved into the farmhouse with me 14 months earlier after my wife passed. That had been my older son's idea. He said he was worried about me being alone out here, 40 miles from the nearest town, no family close by. He said his mother would have wanted someone looking after me. I believed him. I was grieving and I was tired, and I believed him. I pulled out every document I could find that night and locked them in the glove box in my truck. Didn't sleep much. My youngest drove up from Nashville the next morning. She sat down at the kitchen table with me, this same table where I'd eaten breakfast every day for 31 years, and she laid out what she'd found. She'd been reviewing some estate documents for a client. Something in the paperwork reminded her of the forms I'd mentioned signing a few months back. Documents, Lou said, were just about updating the farm's operating agreement. She'd asked me to email her copies. I had. She spent 2 nights going through them. "Dad," she said, "you signed a transfer of beneficial interest. Do you know what that means?" I told her I didn't. Lou had told me it was routine. He'd had a notary come to the house. I'd signed where they pointed. What it meant, my daughter explained slowly and carefully, the way she talked when she was trying not to cry, was that the income and eventual control of the farm had been quietly shifted, not all at once, piece by piece over 4 separate documents, my signature on each one, my name, my hand. Lou had power of attorney, which I'd given him after my wife's hospitalization. I'd never revoked it. "There's more," she said. The farm had been used as collateral on a business loan, a loan I knew nothing about, a loan that, if defaulted, would trigger foreclosure proceedings against the property. I sat very still. Through the window I could see the big white oak at the edge of the south field. My grandfather planted that tree. I used to climb it as a boy. My wife used to sit under it in July when the heat got bad. "Where is Lou now?" I asked. "His truck's in the barn. He and Sherry went into town." "Good," I said. "Then we have some time." My daughter had already called a real estate attorney she knew and trusted, a woman named, well, I'll just call her my daughter's colleague because she made me promise not to use her name publicly. This colleague had contacts at a title company. They'd begun the process of flagging the transfers, quietly. Nothing filed yet, nothing that would alert Lou. The hardest part of those next 2 weeks was sitting across the dinner table from my son. I want to say something about that, because people always ask me how I did it, how I sat there and passed the salt and talked about the weather and asked how his day went while knowing what I knew. The answer is this. I spent 38 years running a cattle operation in Middle Tennessee. I watched the sky turn green and had to decide in 30 seconds whether to move 300 head of cattle or let them take their chances. I've had to put down animals I raised from calves. I've had to tell hired men they wouldn't have work come spring. You learn to hold things inside until the right moment. Grief, anger, fear. They'll all still be there when you need them. The thing is not to spend them too early. So I passed the salt. I talked about the weather. My daughter worked from her laptop at my kitchen table every day that week. She filed a petition to revoke the power of attorney on the grounds that it had been obtained under false pretenses and used in ways inconsistent with my expressed wishes. Her colleague filed a lis pendens on the property, a legal notice that put potential buyers and lenders on alert that the ownership was in dispute. The business loan was flagged for fraud review. On a Tuesday morning, while Lou and Sherry were still in bed, my daughter and I sat with two investigators from the State Attorney General's office. They'd been looking at a predatory real estate scheme that had targeted elderly landowners across 3 counties. My son's name had come up in their investigation 6 weeks before my daughter's call. That was the part that hit me hardest. Sitting in my own kitchen while a woman half my age explained to me that my son had done this before. A widow over in Wilson County had lost 80 acres. An old farmer near Lewisburg had signed away mineral rights he didn't know he had. My son and 2 other men had been running this for at least 3 years. Lou came down the stairs at 8:30. He walked into the kitchen and stopped. He looked at the investigators. He looked at my daughter. He looked at me. I looked back at him. I didn't say anything. He tried to smile. "Dad, what's going on?" "I think you know," I said. That was all I said to him that morning. The investigators handled the rest. Sherry came downstairs 20 minutes later and started crying before anyone had said a word to her. That told me something. I'd wondered in those 2 weeks whether she'd known. Now I had my answer. She'd known. They were both asked to leave the property that day. They went to stay with Sherry's sister over in Murfreesboro. My daughter stayed with me. That evening, after everyone was gone, I walked the fence line along the south pasture. Same section I'd been checking the night she called. The cedar post still needed replacing. I made a note to call my neighbor's boy, who did good work and didn't overcharge. Life had to continue. The fence still needed fixing, whether my heart was broken or not. The legal process took 4 months. I won't walk you through every hearing and filing because honestly most of it was my daughter and her colleague doing the work while I drove fence posts and tried to keep the operation running. What I can tell you is this: the power of attorney was revoked. The property transfers were unwound. The business loan was voided on the grounds of fraud. Lou and his 2 associates were indicted on charges that included elder financial abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Under Tennessee law, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult is a Class C felony. My son was 59 years old and he was looking at felony charges. I didn't feel triumphant when I heard that. I want to be honest about that. My daughter hugged me in the parking lot of the courthouse, and I stood there with my arms at my sides for a moment before I hugged her back. Because what was I supposed to feel? My firstborn son had looked at his father's grief and seen an opportunity. He came to the farm once, about 6 weeks after the indictment. I saw his truck coming up the drive, and I walked out onto the porch and waited. He looked smaller than I remembered. Amazing what a few months of consequences will do to a man. He said he was sorry. He said Sherry had pushed him into it. He said he'd always meant to pay the money back, that it was supposed to be a short-term thing, that he'd gotten in over his head with the other men and couldn't find a way out. Every sentence started with something that wasn't him. I let him talk. When he stopped, I said, "Who do you think taught you to be a man?" He didn't answer. "I taught you," I said. 30 years I tried to teach you what it means to do right by people. And you looked at your mother's grave, and you looked at this land and you saw something to take." His eyes filled up. I won't pretend that didn't affect me. This was my boy. I'd held him when he was 6 hours old. I'd taught him to drive a tractor on this same property. A father's love doesn't evaporate just because the man standing in front of you turned out differently than you prayed. But I also knew something that took me a long time to learn. Love is not the same as trust. And trust, once gone this way, doesn't come back by wishing. "Go home," I said. "Get a lawyer. Tell the truth. Pay what you owe." "Dad." "I'm not finished." I waited. In 10 years, 20 years, if you've done the work, real work, the kind that costs you something, then maybe we can sit down and talk. But not today, not for a long while. He nodded. He didn't say anything else. He got back in his truck and drove down the gravel road until I couldn't see him anymore. I stood on that porch until the dust settled. Then I went inside and called my daughter to tell her he'd come. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm standing," I said. "That's enough." The case went to trial 8 months after the indictment. Lou's 2 associates took plea deals. Lou fought it, which his attorney apparently advised against. He was convicted on 2 of the 3 counts, sentenced to 4 years in the state facility, with eligibility for parole after serving 2.5. He was also ordered to pay restitution, his share of the damages to all victims, including me, coming to just over $90,000. I watched the verdict read aloud from the third row of a courtroom in Nashville. My daughter sat next to me. She held my hand when the judge spoke, not in a way that was asking me if I was all right, but in a way that said she was there. That was enough. Sherry called me 3 weeks after sentencing. She wanted me to know that she'd had no choice, that Lou had controlled everything, that she was sorry. I listened to the whole thing. When she finished, I told her I hoped she found her way through it. I meant it. Then I hung up. The farm is still mine. I know that sounds like it should feel like more, like there should be some grand moment of standing in the field with your arms out, breathing free. Maybe for some people it does. For me, it just felt like returning to something that had never stopped being mine, even when someone was trying to take it. This land has been in my family for 4 generations. My great-grandfather cleared the first field. My grandfather built a barn that still stands on the north end of the property. My father never let a single acre go, not even in the bad years. I'm 65 now, and I don't intend to be the one who breaks that chain. I made some changes after everything settled. I updated my estate documents with an attorney my daughter vetted personally. I created a revocable living trust, which, for anyone who doesn't know, is a legal structure that keeps your assets protected and passes them to your chosen heirs, without going through probate court and without giving any one person unchecked control. My daughter is the successor trustee. My farm goes to her outright, and a smaller parcel goes to a land conservation organization I've worked with for years. Lou receives nothing, and that decision is mine to make. In most states, parents are under no legal obligation to leave children any share of their estate. This is your right. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. My neighbor's boy fixed the south fence in October. Good work. Tight posts, clean wire. I walked the whole line the day he finished and didn't find a single weak spot. My daughter came up for Thanksgiving. Just the 2 of us and her boyfriend, who is a decent man and knows how to be useful in a kitchen, which I appreciate. We ate at this same table, talked about her cases, talked about the cattle prices, talked about nothing in particular for hours in that comfortable way that only happens with people you actually trust. I thought about Lou. Can't help it. He's still my son even now. That part doesn't turn off. I thought about the boy who used to sit across this same table, who'd come in muddy from the field and eat 3 helpings and fall asleep on the couch watching the game. Where does that boy go? I don't know. Maybe he was always somewhere underneath the man Lou became. Maybe the man Lou became was always underneath the boy. I can't answer that. What I know is this. You can love someone and still refuse to be destroyed by them. These 2 things can exist at the same time. That took me longer to learn than it should have. I was raised to believe that family was the one thing you held on to no matter what. And maybe that's true. Maybe I'm still holding on, in some way I can't fully articulate. But holding on doesn't mean opening the door back up. Not until the account is settled. Not until there's something real to trust again. I received a letter from Lou 2 months ago. Brief, 4 sentences. He said he was doing the required program in the facility. He said he understood now what he'd done. He said he wasn't asking for anything. He said he wasn't asking for anything. He said he hoped the farm was doing well. I read it twice, put it in the drawer of my desk in the office, the same desk where my father used to sit and pay bills on Sunday evenings. I haven't responded. I'm not sure when I will. But I kept the letter. That means something, I think, even if I can't say exactly what. The south field is dormant now, the way it gets in January. But come March, the grass will come back the way it always does, green and thick along the creek bank first, then spreading up the slope toward the oak grove. My grandfather used to say that land has a longer memory than people do. It remembers every good season and every bad one. It keeps going either way. I try to do the same. I keep thinking about the fence line. Not the trial, not the courthouse, not the morning Lou walked into the kitchen and saw the investigators sitting at my table. I think about the south pasture fence, cedar post that needed replacing. I was out there checking them the night my daughter called. I went back out to check them the evening after Lou left the property for good. And when my neighbor's boy finished the repair in October, I walked every inch of that line myself. There's something in that I'm still working out. What Lou did had a logic to it, even if the logic was rotten. He watched his father grieve. He watched me sign papers without reading them because I was tired and sad and I trusted him. He saw an opening and he walked through it. That's not a mystery. That's just what happens when a person lets their character erode slowly enough that they stop noticing it going. He didn't become that man overnight. Nobody does. There were probably 100 small decisions between the boy I raised and the man who sat across from investigators in my kitchen. 100 moments where he chose the easier, cheaper thing and told himself it didn't matter. It always matters. That's the part I'd want him to understand, if he ever really sits with what he did. The choices that feel small are the ones that build the foundation of who you actually are. My daughter understood something I hadn't fully taught her, or maybe she'd learned it somewhere I hadn't been watching. She knew that caring about someone means telling them the hard thing, not protecting them from it. She drove 4 hours at 6 in the morning to sit at this table and show me documents I didn't want to see. She could have convinced herself it wasn't her business. She could have waited. She didn't. That kind of clear-eyed courage, the willingness to act on what you know is right even when it's costly and uncomfortable. That's not something you're born with. You build it. You build it by paying attention to the world around you, by thinking carefully instead of reacting, by being honest with yourself about what's actually happening even when the truth is inconvenient. I'm 65 years old. I spent 4 decades running a cattle operation in Middle Tennessee, and I thought I knew something about reading people. Turns out grief can knock that out of you faster than anything. I stopped being careful, stopped questioning. That's on me, and I've sat with it. But I also know this. When I needed to hold myself together for 2 weeks across a dinner table from my own son, knowing what I knew I held. When I needed to walk that fence line the night everything fell apart, I walked it. The land still needed tending. Life still required showing up. You don't get to collapse just because you're entitled to. That's the thing nobody tells you about surviving something like this. It's not one big moment of strength. It's 100 small ones. It's passing the salt. It's making the call to the attorney. It's standing on the porch and saying what needs to be said and then going back inside alone. Every one of those moments is a choice. And every choice is either building you into someone you can respect or taking a little of that away. The farm is still here. The white oak at the edge of the south field is still here. Come March, the grass will come back along the creek bank the way it always does. I'll be here too.